Hey everyone, Will Brink here, brinkzone.com. Today, going to try to cover a contentious topic best I can in a hopefully balanced manner. But the unfortunate problem when you try to discuss certain topics, and this one's going to be on vegan diets, people already have their position. They tend to have what we call cognitive dissonance about the topic, which is to say that any information that is counter to their pre-existing position they tend to reject. It tends to cause the wind is blowing a lot in Florida today, and it's revving up a bunch of junk in the air, and it's making me clear my throat. Anyway, so I'm going to try to cover vegan diets, some of the primary claims that have been made by vegans over the years, and go through them. I wrote an extensive article on the topic, which I'm going to use, as I've done in other videos, as sort of my template to go through it. And the reason that actually works out pretty well is it allows me to sort of just focus on some essential points. And then for those who want to go into the deep dive and get all the information they want from something I may say, can do that by reading the article, and of course, even further going into the resources and the sources that I use. So using an article as sort of my template, my own article, somebody else's article, whatever, or studies or whatever, actually works out really well. So first question, the reason that I wrote this article originally was a lot of my articles, because if people don't know me, I've been writing since the early 90s, was published in a ton of print publications, pre-internet and all that. So many of my articles, whether they were on print publications or here on the good old internet, via my website, what have you, is due to, my research on a topic that I have interest in. But not all of them. Sometimes, I'll write an article just because I don't feel like anybody else has done it in the way that I want to see it. And, sort of discussing the major claims of vegan diets, or the major reasons that some claim humans should be vegans. I just never saw anybody address the topic the way that I wanted it addressed. And so, usually if I'm talking with somebody, well, I'm going to say debating. It's almost also a loaded word, but unfortunately, every time you get into a topic about vegan diet, non-vegan diet, whatever, it usually is not discussing. It usually ends up being debating and something a lot worse. But anyway, so many times when somebody would make a claim, and I would go look either for study or a good article or something that I felt covered it, and say, well, you need to go read this or whatever. I couldn't find it. So I said, well, I'm just going to put together an article that covers these major topics that I, am well-versed in, that I've researched, that I have a good understanding of, that goes through the major claims and issues of vegan diets. This article is not necessarily designed to convince someone to not be vegan or be vegan. I am simply, as a scientist, science-minded guy, objectivist, who really does not care about how people feel or do not feel about a thing versus what is the objective reality, going to present that. And unfortunately, I hope that people can watch the video and read the article and then have, an objective, not overly emotional response. Again, not trying to convince people of one thing or the other, though I'm sure people, because I'm just going to say up front, a lot of the major claims that are made by proponents of vegans are demonstrably false. Not all of them. We will get to that. So I just want to put that up front. Okay. I'm going to use the terrible cliche. Some of my best friends are vegans. However, I respect their choices, and I don't mind. Yeah, sure. I'll poke at them a little once in a while, but we're friends, and, they'll poke back at me and we'll have fun with it. But so that's my point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the article. I'm going to go through some of the big points, the major claims, made by proponents of vegan diets, pick them apart a bit. I'll leave the comments open on this video, and hopefully people will take the time to watch it and so forth before they comment. It's an unfortunate reality I have found again on the internet, especially on YouTube, but just in general, that people will comment first and then maybe read or watch the video later. That's not a good look. Okay. I don't do that. Okay. I have a number of videos that some of the comments are clearly by people who didn't watch the video and just went off, let's say, the title. And like I say, because I guess somebody said, I don't know who said it, but anyway, basically what they told me they didn't watch the video without telling me they didn't watch the video by their comments. So here we go. So let's bring the article in. Okay. So we're going to go down. I'm going to use the article as a template. We're going to scroll through it. We're going to go through like the major talking points to some of the major claims as proponents of vegan diets, of which, and again, I'm going to say up front, of which we will conclude with what I see as a perfectly reasonable, valid reason to be a vegan. Okay, so I'm going to throw that out there so that whoever's watching this and may not want to, say, oh, this guy's just going to bash vegans and all that, which is not totally true. Again, I wouldn't do it. I'm going to be balanced here. So just to throw that nut out there that, this article actually does end, just FYI, with, what I see as the most defensible, reason, obvious reason to be a vegan. Okay. So let's get into this a little bit. So we're going to scroll down. So basically the opening is just sort of what I told you in the beginning, which, why did I feel compelled to write this article? That one, I didn't find any other articles that actually covered it the way I felt it should be covered. Two, I just, as a little bit of a pushback to some vegans, not all, but some vegans, that has sort of taken it on as it's almost religion. That is, to them, they're just there's just a lot of dogma involved, and anytime, and whether it's nutrition, because there's a lot of dogma in nutrition in general, religion, CrossFit, whatever. I don't like dogma. I think everything that we believe, if what you believe in and what you back your positions, if you can't tolerate them being questioned or challenged, you really don't believe in them as deeply as you think you do, or at least maybe you're not as well versed as you think you are. So anything that you believe in, I believe in, you should be okay with it being challenged and be okay. And I think almost the definition of dogma, in a sense, to me at least, is the inability to challenge it, because I said so, or, because it's always been that way, or, so-and-so claims it, my favorite is go research it. That's not an answer. All right. So I didn't go through these classic claims that are made by some vegans, not all, why people should be vegan, these were no in particular order, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But they are, I guess, just by coincidence, maybe that's where my mind was working, from the easiest to debunk or address to the least easy, I guess. And I didn't do that on purpose, but all right. So here's a classic one. Humans are not meant to eat meat. And there is some that will claim that humans are naturally herbivores. Let's just get this out. There is not a single evolutionary biologist, human anatomist, or respected human paleontologist, or major scientific group focused on human anatomy and physiology that views modern humans as anything but omnivores. Not a one. I don't care if some anemic, skinny vegan doctor with a YouTube channel says otherwise. You know who I'm talking about. Or anybody else claims that. That is the reality. Humans, and when you talk about this and you debate, somebody will put up some lame meme, with like a list of reasons why humans are omnivore or herbivores and not omnivores. A, they're all wrong. Two, that's not peer-reviewed science. And what I do want to say about that also, just let me back up just a little bit. I really did my best with this article to use vegetarian and vegan sources as information wherever I could, because again, I don't want proponents of vegan diets to say, oh, Big Meat funded that. Obviously, the guy who wrote that is, in the pocket of, the dairy industry or the meat industry, so yada yada. So I really did try to use vegan, scientists, vegan sources or vegetarian sources where I could. An excellent article that is linked in this article is by a vegan biologist, and he goes through the full deep dive into why humans are omnivores and are not herbivores. And I'm going to quote him here, but I recommend it. It's linked in here. That trying to claim that humans are something else than omnivores are just counterproductive, since it's quite easily debunked and we lose credibility. There are plenty of reasons to be vegan and still stick to what is true. And he's right. That is it's a non, I was going to say non sequitur. I don't know if that even works. It's a non-starter. You really do, if you're a vegan, proponent of vegan diets, whatever, and you are convinced, or were convinced by somebody else or whatever, that humans are natural herbivores, you've lost all credibility. That one really needs to be given up and just move forward. It does not make vegan diets inherently beneficial, inherently negative, or anything else. What I will say, and this it goes into the article a bit more. The reality is that humans, being omnivores, being very successful omnivores, can eat damn near anything and survive. Hence why you have Inuit Indians who lived on literally nothing but straight animal blubber and protein pretty much for thousands of years that we are aware of, in fairly good health. And you have, other populations that are almost exclusively plant-based, not totally, we'll get to that, plant-based and do okay too. So that is why humans are omnivores, and very successful omnivores. And our biology, our physiology, our anatomy, and everything about us absolutely demonstrates we are omnivores. This one kind of sticks in my craw. Slightly change the topic, but in just as FYI, we know that human ancestors have been eating meat at least 2.5 million years, maybe longer. There was a not long ago a study published that suggested that, in fact, what the term they used were hypercarnivores. That humans were hypercarnivores, literally exclusive meat eaters for a lengthy time. I think it was a couple 100,000 years. It's fairly well accepted among the scientific community also that probably how we humans took such a direction away from our common ancestors to develop these big brains, and this high level of intelligence compared to others, is they think probably, again, because somewhere along the way we started eating so much meat, we started hunting. The density of the calories we're eating, especially in the organ meats, to get other societies, other cultures. We Americans, unfortunately, I'm just talking about America and some other cultures, but anyway, unfortunately, we Americans are fixated on the muscle meats and have just about all but avoided the various organ meats, which have a lot of nutrition in them. Anyway, it is generally well accepted among the scientific community that a large reason, if not the reason, that we went in the direction we went is because our ancestors started hunting and eating high caloric density, high protein, high nutrient dense foods, which allowed us our brains to grow, which are very energy intensive organs, by the way, and not to spend our entire day looking for food, which is what basically all other animals do when they're not mating. They're looking for food, and that includes our closest relatives. All right, which brings us on to the next one, which is another classic claim by some vegans, not all, that we should eat like our closest relatives. And that's, as an example of how we should eat as, herbivores or vegans, let's look to our closest relatives. Two is one was the last one. Two is eating like our closest relatives. Reality is a right off the bat, you're not a gorilla. You're not a chimpanzee, what have you. However, even the way that most people, again, have gone through life being taught how chimps eat, they are our closest relatives, is wrong. And, again, I think I grew up the same way you did, whatever. Again, we're under this impression that chimps are these sweet, animals that live in Africa and eat fruit and hang out and they're peaceful. It's completely wrong. All of that is completely wrong. Chimps are extremely aggressive hunters of animals. They have wars. They have wars literally between tribes. There are wars. Chimps actually have wars. Chimps are very aggressive hunters of other monkeys, some animals, but I think especially other monkeys. And in fact, in some areas, and you see a picture right there with a chimp with a monkey in his mouth. In some areas, chimps have been so aggressive that they have actually eliminated the population of other monkeys in the area. They have actually hunted other monkeys almost to literal extinction, which unfortunately makes them a lot more like us than maybe we actually believe. But it's in reverse. Now, yes, the majority of food that chimps get, yes, are vegetable-based, fruits, vegetables, and all that. Are plant-based, but chimps are not the sweet vegetarian herbivores that some people have led them to believe, and they are quite aggressive. And that has also been found for bonobos, which is their cousin. And one of them, I think this was, I forget what the source was, but you can see I've numbered it. It's at the bottom of the article. But anyway, from one of the articles, I think it was National Geographic. But anyway, a quote from the article, which you can read, which I have linked, is their tendency to blindly overhunt their prey. Chimpanzees are rather similar to humans. Perhaps that's not too surprising. They are our closest living relatives. So the let's eat like our closest relatives routine that I've seen many times proponents of vegan eating is, well, if you want to eat like your closest relative, then start hunting other monkeys, I guess, because that's what they do. And interestingly enough, now I've heard one of the favorites, which is nonsensical, is if we'll look at gorillas. They're very muscular and they eat nothing but fruit, something. They're not our closest relatives. Chimps are. You just heard my spiel about that. So you're not a gorilla. I'm not a gorilla. They do have very different digestive systems, and so forth. But just FYI, they have found the DNA of animals in the poo of African Western lowland gorillas. What does that mean? We don't know exactly. That is, are they hunting? Did they just find, a dead carcass or a dead deer or something and ate it? We don't know. However, we do know that they eat and digest other animals. How often, how much, don't know. But again, we should eat like our closest relatives is just a non-starter, and I do link some articles. Now we're getting down to, I think, for many involved or proponents of vegan diets, this one, health and longevity is kind of the big one. I think many people may say, okay, whatever, that other stuff is no big deal to me, or I wasn't aware, or I don't care. But this is the big one, for me, for some people will say, I do this for my health. And this one is, I'm not going to pick apart everything about this, because if you want to get into the meat and the potatoes of it and the sources, you can read this article. But I want to sort of give the overall picture of this one. First, these studies are based on epidemiological population studies. They're correlational studies. So correlational studies, epidemiological studies have their uses, but they're actually not useful for cause and effect. It is unfortunate that most people, including people that are educated enough to know better, will often make cause and effect conclusions. But if anybody's taken, Epi 101 or biostats or whatever, like page 1, book 1, correlation does not equal causation, period. Doesn't mean it can't. It just means that you cannot deduce it from that data. What am I saying? Generally speaking, population studies find that vegan and vegetarian diets are correlated with less disease than typical standard American diets, also known as SAD. I would expect anything is healthier than the standard American diet. It comes as no surprise at all to me, of course, that vegans and on a large scale, we're not talking individuals, we're talking, population wide, when you're doing population studies, not real surprising. However, when I said you cannot make cause and effect conclusions from this, is because there are things called, confounding variables. There may be other reasons. For example, we know that there's something called healthy user bias or upper class bias. We know that people that are vegetarians and vegans also tend to exercise more. We know they tend to not smoke. We know they tend to not drink as much alcohol, and so on and so forth. There's a number of reasons that may explain it. It should come as no surprise to anybody that basically anything is healthier than the standard American diet. So it's not very valuable. It doesn't mean we ignore it, but it's not what you should hang your hat on. And not one professional or anybody who knows even a basics of stats and epidemiological and so forth. Epi studies, some people unfortunately also will go the other direction. Unfortunately, say they're useless. Epi studies, the correlational studies are used. They're not useless. They have a very specific role to play. They give scientists and medical professionals big data sets to find connections, associations, and then what they will do is they will start to dig down in the data to see if confounding variables were controlled for. If not, they may do additional studies where they control for some of the stuff we were talking about. And then what they will really need to do is a direct intervention study. They will say, okay, we have very strong correlational data that suggests eating, bacon 7 days a week is a negative. And then, you have to, at some point to know, you're going to have to actually get a group of people, feed them bacon. I'm just making up, a food source for 7 days straight for X amount of time, and versus placebo or versus something else. And then so that way you are controlling all the variables and you can make a cause and effect assessment. That's part of it. Two, even the correlational studies are not, again, all that people think they are. And I do give a big example of one. A lot of people, for example, will point to Okinawa. Now, there's something called the blue zones. I think there's 7 of them, 6 or 7 blue zones. But anyway, the blue zones are these areas that have an unusually high number of centenarians. And that's people that live to 100 or over. And Okinawa is one of them. So there was one study of, among others, people like to point to Okinawa as a place where people live long and have a plant-based diet. And let's we also need to clarify something before I finish this. Plant-based is not vegan. Plant-based is plant-based. It is not vegan. And therefore, when you say plant-based, there's a number of very high quality plant-based diets, but they're not vegan. There is a difference. They do include, fish. They include small amounts of pork and red meat and so forth. So some people mistakenly, obviously vegan is plant-based, but not all plant-based is vegan. Just let's be clear there. Anyway, one of the studies that they point to Okinawans actually compared Okinawa to another area of Japan called the Akita Prefecture, and actually found that Okinawa, known for its very long lifespans, the Akita Prefecture known for very low lifespans as it applies to Japanese, and found that the Okinawans actually ate more meat, considerably more meat and animal fat than the Akita area. So again, got to be really careful with which data you choose, which you focus on. Selection bias, because again, we're all human. We're all going to be attracted, drawn towards studies, that sort of support our pre-existing internal interests, whatever they may be. It's just human nature. This is why there are things like double-blind placebo. So even the researchers don't know because they have bias. It's why there's things like peer review and so forth. But having said that, if you're interested in this topic, so that I don't bore you all to death with this, go to the article, go through it. It explains why in more depth than I gave you, that again, it is not remotely, I went up a little bit, that the health and longevity association between, say, vegan and vegetarian diets is not remotely as robust or as strong or even, as good as you think it is, even among population studies. There has been some recent studies also where they found some interesting data. For example, vegans and vegetarians were more likely to have strokes than non-vegans. Now, again, cause and effect is what we can't say. We don't know why that is. But again, just FYI. All right. So this one's kind of a long one because it's a big one. I mean, I know people are going to want to really, get into this one because it's kind of challenging a real sacred cow. Oh, should I say sacred broccoli? I don't know. Anyway, let me finish this particular section by just saying that, okay, just for those readers are saying, okay, well, I'm confused. I thought vegan diets were great, or I thought, okay, keto, whatever diet. I'm confused. There's a gazillion different diets. What is the diet with the best data? And I'm going to give you, I'm going to say it, and then you can go look it up yourself. The diet with the most, the nutrition, I shouldn't say diet because diet means weight loss. The nutritional approach for longevity, disease prevention, and so forth, with the best data by far is the Mediterranean diet. All right. And the Mediterranean diet is plant-based, but it is not vegan. And that one, again and again, a Mediterranean or Mediterranean style diet, of which is, you will see, well, hold on, you can see right there, it's linked. And that being, this is not an article about the Mediterranean diet, I put that in there for those people that are saying, look, okay, well, I just want to know, I haven't made up my mind, or, okay, you've convinced me, maybe I should, change something around. What do you recommend? I will tell you, as far as data, including when I was talking about not just correlational data, epidemiology, social data, society-based data, even direct intervention studies, of which there's not as many as you may think, where they actually feed people food, control the variables. A Mediterranean-style diet seems to come up number one. So let's move on. I had a quick sidebar here on longevity versus sports nutrition. Just remember that the goals of longevity are not always the same as they are for performance. Okay. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. But sometimes what you may need to eat, if you're reading this and you read my stuff because you know me from the bodybuilding magazines, and you're as interested in performance or building muscle, whatever, as you are about longevity, you really have to differentiate the fact that longevity and sports nutrition are not identical. Yes, a well-constructed, properly constructed sports nutrition program should be healthy. It is not, but it may not be optimal for longevity. So that's just a quickie. Nutrient deficiencies in vegan diets. I don't spend a lot of time on this one only because everybody's aware of it. I don't think there's any vegans that are not aware of the potential of nutrient deficiencies, of which are fairly common. But obviously, B12, a number of deficiencies are common. So I don't spend a lot of time on this one. I think you all are, whether you're pro or con or whatever you are in the middle, that one's easy to look up. And I didn't think it was very useful, to go on and on about deficiencies. Okay, now this is a big one that I bet the majority of people reading this are not aware. And I don't really know why this one hasn't gotten more attention, both inside the vegan community or even the vegetarian community and the non. And that is psychological disorders. The finding that vegans and vegetarians have much higher rates of psychological disorders, depression, anxiety, self-harm is been around a long time. It's not new. There's a number of studies. It's not one of, or it's been well established that there is a strong correlation in multiple studies between psychological disorders and vegan and vegetarian diets. Now, I have linked a good meta-analysis in there, but there's a number of them, of papers you can find. There's also some just popular non-scientific papers, like Psychology Today and some other. You can find like just easy to read articles. And I'm surprised this one doesn't get more attention. However, this brings us back to what I said before. These are population correlational studies. They do not give you cause and effect. And I'm not even going to suggest cause and effect. Here's what I'm going to say about that. Is two obvious explanations for this. Now, maybe there's another explanation I haven't thought of, but there's two obvious ones going in two different directions. One, vegan and vegetarian diets may not cause any of those things. It may be that people that are more prone to depression, anxiety, and so forth are just more likely to be vegetarians and vegans. Maybe they became vegetarians and vegans because they thought it may actually help. Maybe it did. I don't know. We don't have those studies. Going in the other direction of cause and effect, it is also possible that some of the nutrients that vegans are known to be deficient in are specifically important for brain function, health, and mood, such as omega-3 fatty acids. B12, creatine's another one. Creatine, studies of which is, if you look on my website, you type in creatine and mood or creatine depression, I have a big write-up. So creatine is, there's a number of studies that find that creatine is associated with better mood, less depression, and so forth. So we're not sure which of the two is going on here. It may be a little of both, but this is where correlational studies let you down. Somebody who doesn't know any better, or somebody that just wants to say negative things about vegan diets may say, see, these papers show that, not eating meat makes them more depressed. It's not true. It doesn't show that, but it is strongly correlated. So the meta-analysis that had looked through a bunch of studies concluded that the majority of studies, and especially of higher quality studies, and I touched on what higher quality studies are, direct inferential studies, showed that those who avoided meat consumption had significantly higher rates of risk of depression, anxiety, and or self-harm behaviors. Again, take that for what it's worth, but it's not something you should ignore. Okay, I don't care, again, if you're vegan, vegetarian, or non. That if you are a vegan and you're aware of this now and you weren't aware of it before, obviously, now if you don't ever suffer anything, any depression, anxiety, whatever, then okay, then don't worry about it. But what I would do would be strongly recommend finding, of course, a high quality source of omega-3 fatty acids. There are some vegan sources of quote unquote fish oils. We're talking about EPA, DHA. A lot of plant-based foods are not high in omega-3s, even the plant-based omega-3, LNA, sorry, alpha linoleic acid. Flax oil is particularly high in that. But like I say, there is also some debate as to how well people are able to convert the preformed LNA, alpha linoleic acid, into the active EPA and DHA. You're probably better off getting the active lipid, but that's another article. So just be aware of that. But I am surprised that of all the things that people like to use to poke vegans with, they don't use this one more often. But I have found very few vegans that I have spoken to that are aware of that. So now you are. Advice for vegan athletes. This is a really good section, again, with a good paper. It just really goes in. I'm not going to go deep into this one other than to say that athletic populations, because they higher demand for a number of nutrients, are probably also at greater risk of deficiencies. And if you're going to be a vegan athlete, you really need to pay special attention to this. Protein obviously is a big one. B12, iron, zinc, calcium, iodine, vitamin D, and long-chain fatty acids are probably the most common deficiencies in vegan diets, and you really got to be on top of that. Unfortunately, again, this sort of goes down an unfortunate direction with some people that will push back about vegan athletes and, show an example of like a handful of successful vegan athletes, which is fine, but it doesn't change anything. They're outliers at best. And, the other probably 99% of athletes in their sport eat meat. So, if you want to, again, that it's anecdotal, and as somebody once said, the plural of anecdote is not data. So I don't think that looking at outliers for anything, the 1%, is probably ever going to really be a good source of people can be successful vegan athletes, and they can, obviously, some can. Of course, again, we also don't know, would that same athlete be more successful if he ate some meat? I don't know. Possible, but we don't have studies. We need those studies. There's not as many studies here. I will say that one of my complaints is that, considering how popular vegan diets have become, the fact that they've been around for thousands of years, that we have so little useful data is kind of surprising at this point. Now, I will also have to just let you all know, if you have never been involved in research, that it's not easy to do those studies. I mean, controlling what people eat, doing it well, controlling what people really eat, and running the study out long enough for it to actually give you useful information is very expensive and not very easy to do. People are not like herding cats. People are like herding cats, walruses, birds, and monkeys. You can obviously feed animals, do this with animals all day, but as far as dealing with human beings and limiting what they eat and knowing what they eat, having enough people to have, group numbers and running it long enough, because every diet actually does something, 8 and 12 weeks. You have to run them out 6 months to a year to really know what's going on, is very difficult and very expensive. Hence, probably why we don't see more of them. All right, so let's move on. Saving the environment. This is going to be another hot one, people. Again, what I'm going to do, not going to go deep into this. What I am going to say about this, and I give you a whole bunch of articles and sources you can go look. You can see I've added a bunch, is that the environmental impact of being a vegan or going plant-based or what have you is far, far from established science, no matter what, again, anybody is telling you, as to benefits, pros and cons. And that's ongoing. And unfortunately, anytime you might mention that, you don't just draw the party line and say, of course, plant-based eating is good for the environment, so on and so forth, you get pushback, you get called names, you get told that you're working for big beef. And I'm not working for big beef, by the way. Now, if big beef wants to contact me, here I am. And we'll see. We can talk big beef if you want to sponsor my page. But until then, I'm just going to tell it like it is. But just understand. Now, here's a bunch of articles I linked. If you want to go down the rabbit hole, all I'm asking is, do not assume that what you've been told or read, that this is a foregone conclusion, that the science is that good about plant-based eating in the environment, is not all that you think it is, and that's still being developed and understood, is all I ask. That one is that's a big one. There's some really interesting stuff. I'll just sort of add a couple interesting papers. I mean, there was a paper that one guy did. He's a professor, he wasn't just some rando, and found, of course, that, per hectare of plant-based growing, more animals die than if they had grown meat on this exact same plot of land. Because, of course, you've got to suppress, if you grow something on a hectare of land, you got a bunch of animals that want to show up and eat your food. So you've got to suppress them. You've got to trap them or kill them or whatever you do. When you go to get that plant-based food, wheat, barley, whatever, you're getting a bunch of animals live in there. Mice, voles, rabbits, birds, whatever. So by the numbers, according to his calculation, you actually killed a whole bunch more animals than you did if you grew something on that, if you grew cows or whatever on that hectare of land. And there's a bunch of stuff like that. There was a study that came out that showed that actually growing lettuce actually was harder on the environment than growing bacon and so forth. Now, when you're doing that hectare of number of animals that may die growing plants versus growing animals, you've got, again, a lot of variables there. It depends, obviously, on what you're growing, depends on where you're growing it. It depends on how you're growing it. It depends on which animals you may grow. I mean, chickens have different efficiency to pigs. There's a lot of moving parts there. I'm just saying, question what you've been told. Go look into it. Make your own decisions. All right. Okay, so now we're getting into, I promised in the beginning of this video that we would talk about, here I may have sounded very negative, about vegans, or at least the claims that some vegans make about why they're vegans or why people should be vegans. And here we're actually going to get to the part where, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, where we actually talk about a perfectly valid reason to be a vegan, in my view. And that's the ethical, moral, or religious perspective. That's a perfectly valid reason to be vegan. And those people that ignore the other stuff that I talked about before, like the vegan biologist, which I'm going to quote him, and so forth, and just say I do it for my for moral and ethical reasons, and that's how that's why I do it. I think that's a perfectly valid reason, and I actually get it. I don't think I'm quite ready to make that jump to giving up my some of my animal based stuff. But again, I think there's a balance we could all strike. For example, I absolutely believe that there should be much stronger advances in animal welfare. I think that those animals that are food animals should, we should give them the best possible life that they can have. We don't need to torture them before they're eaten. But again, when you're trying to feed a planet, it's really easy for people to sit in a house and go shopping to the grocery store and make decisions about basically the fact that, I don't know, a good portion of the planet goes hungry most of the time, and can we feed all those people? Giving animals or anything, even plants, whatever. Again, there is an article I linked that says that the planet could not sustain actually going plant-based. You'll have to look into it. But I think that there is absolutely a lot that we could do on general animal welfare, the way they're treated, the way they're fed, the way they die, and all that. I think that if we all could get together and discuss that rationally. Now, the people that are just going to keep, trying to harp on about ending all meat eating and no one should eat meat and so forth, then you're not going to have a conversation. You're never going to meet in the middle. I'm never going to talk to you. Either is anybody else. I do think that people, at least in some countries where they can afford to, because a lot of countries can't afford to have this conversation, that they can afford to have this conversation about how can we all say, okay, we accept people are going to eat meat. People should, for their own health, probably for the the betterment of the planet, go towards a plant-based diet. How do we make that happen? Well, then we can have a conversation. So similar to the other section, I'm not going to give you all the information other than to say I think that the one that holds water, the one that you can defend, and I'm going to quote the vegan biologist again. He said, as a vegan, I strongly hold the position that killing and using animals for human gains is wrong. It's wrong regardless of if it's healthy or not. It's just wrong regardless if it's bad for the environment, climate, or not. So I think that position is one that is defensible, regardless whether someone may agree or not agree from their perspective. But that one I think is the most defensible. I think that is a valid reason for someone to become a vegan, and I can support that and understand that, whether I am myself interested or ready to do such a thing. So that's the one that I think holds water. So conclusion, the intent of this article is just to help people make informed decisions based on science and objective reasoning without emotions. I hope I've succeeded in that. So again, if you want all the details, you want to read the sources, you want to sort of get a little more here, go to this article. I will link it below this website, below the video. Obviously, let me get this off of my. Okay, so I've been on for a long enough time now. That's what I have to say on my article on vegan diets, covering some of the major claims made by proponents of vegan diets, vegan nutrition, which as a scientist type bother me because they're just not accurate. And again, I think the vegan biologist, to go with him to say that you ruin your credibility, you lose the credibility if you don't actually are not honest or accurate about what you're saying, even if your heart or even if your intentions are in the right place. But there is a lot of very poor information that goes around about all diets, including vegan diets, as you are well aware. A lot of conflicting information. A lot of it is based on agendas and personal narratives and bias. So that's that. Obviously, this video is brought to you by Alpha Joe. Tastes good, good for you, feels good. We call that the trifecta of win. You can see the, oh, wrong way. You can see the corner. It's hard to point at there you go. Up in the corner. Alpha Joe. It's a coffee booster. And I'll see you guys all on the Brink Zone.